Humberto, I'd like to welcome you here to England and to this conversation.
Thank you.
In your work, Humberto, you refer a lot to the term systems, and whilst I recognise that you are not a systems scientist, but you are principally a biologist and a neurobiologist, nonetheless you often refer to living systems, autopoietic systems, biological systems, structure-determined systems. Would you care to describe in what sense you use this word system in your work?
Yes. I use the word system to refer to any collection of elements that, through preferential interactions between them, generate a boundary with respect to other elements with which they could also interact, in such a way that a totality results from this boundary that arises through the preferential interaction between the elements that constitute this system.
And how do you use these distinctions in your daily life?
I use the notion of system is necessary, certainly, to deal with living systems or with living beings, because biological phenomena take place through the realization of individual living beings. But in relation to living beings, you have to handle something else, which is change, in a very dramatic manner that you can observe in movement, for example, in growth, and things of the sort. And you have to handle change and at the same time stability. Somehow you say it is the same system that has grown. My child has grown so much, or something of the sort. So you have to have a way of dealing with what is conserved and what changes. And that requires a view of these collections of molecules, in the case of living systems, which constitute the unity which is the living system. And it is through that I have been involved with a reflection on systems in general and on living systems in particular.
Does your understanding of systems and the way in which you bring systems to your work have a history? I mean, would you care to talk a bit about the history of that?
Yes. Well, it has. The history is the following. Teaching about the origin of living systems in the medical school in 1960, I was confronted with a question by a student who asked the question not exactly, but essentially in the following terms. Sir, you say that living systems began 3,500 million years ago. What began 3,500 million years ago, so that you can say now that living system began then? And I could not answer this question immediately, but I took this question as an invitation to reflect not only about the origin of living system, but about how could one say that something begins? In what moment a system begins? How do you know that it is there and was not there before? How can you speak about change? Well, this led me in this reflection, on the one hand, to say something about living systems in particular, and at the same time to say something about systems in general, and to eventually to make the distinction which I make between organization and structure. These words, of course, had a longer history than my use of them, but I have come to use the word organization to refer to what remains invariant, such that one can say, my child has grown already so much. So it's the same person that has grown. The sameness of the person has to be referred by something that is conserved and constitutes the identity of this person. And structure, I use it to refer to the components, to the elements that realize the system, such that this organization can be conserved through them. So in general terms, I would say that the organization is the configuration of relations that define the class identity of a system. And it is, as long as the system conserves its class identity, is invariant. Or better, as long as it is invariant, the system conserves its class identity. If that configuration of relation is not conserved anymore, the system disintegrates, something else appears. And the structure has the elements and their relations which realize a system as a particular system. So the structure has more dimensions than the organization and can change in the history of a system, while the organization cannot change.